Hi, everybody. It's Rachel, founder of Engage and Grow Central Midlands. As part of our Future of Our People video series, I'm delighted today to be joined by Tom Mallett from Ecomotive. So welcome, Tom. Great to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. Before we can launch into the questions, it'd be great just to hear a little bit more about yourself, about Ecomotive and what you do.
Yeah, no, perfect. I started the business just getting on for 10 years ago, which is a kind of interesting time frame because over the first 10 years, it feels like you build a lot of the foundations that then we're going to build on as a business over the kind of coming years. And hopefully we've done some of that, but it has been a bit of a learning process. So we've got about 50 people in the office and nearly 300 people in and working with the business as a whole. And we move cars. So you know the big 10-car transporters you see out on the road? Yeah, that's not what we do. So what we do is we move cars individually, one by one by one. But we move about £2 billion worth of cars a year. Hence why there's quite a few people involved. So if you had a company car or something like that, we'd be the people to bring it to you, hand it over to you, sign the relevant paperwork for the lease companies. Or if you were selling your car on a site like Motorway, which you might have heard of, the advertising, we're their partner, and we'd come and pick up your car and do all the bits in the middle that the tech can't do. So there's lots of moving parts, and a lot of it is about people. You know, that is effectively what we sell. We sell time. You know, we sell people's time.
Ah, cool. Okay. So slightly disappointed that you don't do those big transport.
we have a few. So
How are they not falling off?
I know, it terrifies me. No, we do have 5 multi-car transporters, which aren't the enormous 10-car ones, but they're the bit smaller than that. But really, the core of what we do is those individual, what we call final mile delivery movements.
Gotcha. Talk me through the company name, Ecomotive.
So what you'd love to hear is that lots of thought went into it, and it did. It's surprisingly hard, but one day you've got to settle on something. And I guess you can see why we picked eco, and we do try and kind of live up to that. Although it's difficult, to be really honest. But it's something that I think stands us in good stead, and we have worked on in a number of areas to deliver on that promise. Motive. I guess it rolled off the tongue, as dumb as it sounds. And when we started, we were, effectively, I started the business with 2 other people, one of whom has gone off and does something else now, although we still remain great friends. And as I say, we had to land on something, and then we had to create a logo, and there wasn't much of a budget. But Seat, the car manufacturer, also have a line of things called Ecomotive. We didn't steal it from them, but it's interesting that, I'm sure they spent millions developing that. Yeah. So they should just come to us.
Love it. So managing people, you said you've got 50 people in the office, and then obviously like a vast number more outside of the office that you work with. Managing people is hard. You've been a people leader, I'm assuming, for at least 10 years, because that's how long the company's been going for. Looking back to when you first became a people leader, whenever that might have been, what do you remember as the most terrifying thing, if you can cast your eye back?
I think with running a business, there's so much going on often that you have limited time to be terrified. Terror tends to turn into paralysis, and those have been the least productive times in the last 10 years. But no, there's lots of times when I haven't known what to do. So I started the business when I was 27, and before that, I worked as a journalist. I was a particularly poor journalist, and I worked in and around the motor trade, but certainly not in a management position. So Google and Logic tends to be the go-to, but also I think building up a big network of friends who run businesses, people maybe a bit older than me, or friends from university or school. And in fact, I'm meeting somebody on Thursday afternoon. I've got a meeting with our partner Motorway, and then I'm meeting with a friend of mine who's got a business. It's an ice cream company, actually, and really just to talk about culture. And so often just picking up the telephone, which is, funny enough, a really hard thing that people struggle with nowadays in many areas. But picking up the telephone is so useful in just asking people what to do in certain circumstances. You can read lots of books. I read lots of books, but picking up the telephone can be super useful. So building up that network is really good.
100%. I think you're right, actually, and also hearing from people's own experiences, like learning from, in the nicest way, learning from their mistakes, always a good thing.
And learning from your own mistakes. I think the ability to look at something and say, I messed up there. That's on me. I interviewed someone for a job a few months ago, and I asked them what went wrong in a circumstance, and they said they were unlucky. And I think for me, that was one of the worst. I liked the person who I was interviewing, but that wasn't a good answer, because I think the self-awareness was saying, yes, luck plays a part, but what you really want to hear about is where you got it wrong and where you're going to get it right in the future. If you haven't accepted your own failure, how can you move on from it?
Yeah, really good point. Over the past 10 years, what would you say in terms of the challenges that you've seen or are seeing around culture? I love that you're having a conversation about culture, because they're the best kind, I think. But are there any in your sector particularly that the challenges around culture and engagement that you're seeing?
So I think understanding on both an academic level and also kind of a personal level differences between age groups is really, really important. And I think some of the things that I hadn't fully understood, but we've got an HR manager now that we didn't have obviously at one point, but she's brought a lot to the table. And one of the training programs that we've gone through is about understanding different age groups and what they're good at and what they're not good at. And I think if we talked about Gen Z, for instance, still not entirely sure what that means, but it's the younger people, people a bit younger than me, and actually their brains are fundamentally different to people maybe a generation further on. I'm 38, because they've grown up around different technology. And funny enough, a good example would be they're great at operating multiple screens, which is super useful in some ways, but not so good at what I said 5 minutes ago, which was picking up a telephone. And that is because their brains are wired fundamentally in a totally different way. And I think growing a business is cool because you get to stick round pegs and round holes and square pegs and square holes a lot more, as opposed to trying to get people to do things that they're fundamentally not very good at. Obviously, you can build through training on things that people aren't good at, but you've got to get that balance right between building on things that people can do, but also if somebody's just not going to fit somewhere, I think you've got to be careful not to try and hammer them too hard in that direction. So it's an education. Every week's exciting and new. That's what I quite like about this, because when we're twice the size in a few years' time, I'll have different challenges and I'll have to learn those things, which will be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's a really good insight. I've had that experience of managing that generation. I'm like, just call them. I'm like, what? Call them? Yeah, it'll be okay. And they're like, they psych themselves up for about half an hour beforehand, and they put the phone down. I'm like, oh, okay, that was all right. But as an 80s kid, I spent my childhood on the phone after school, and that's what you did. You called your friends up.
That's what I did. That's exactly it. I was I don't know when I first I was 85, so maybe in the mid 90s, maybe you start kind of picking up a telephone and calling your friends, and you get through to their mother, and then you say, can I speak to X? And that whole process, very, very different to nowadays.
And then you get told off about the phone bill. I remember it well.
Indeed.
Love it. What would you say you're proudest of when it comes to, again, like thinking about the culture of Ecomotive? And
I think if you've ever been through a rocky period, you're quite proud when you come back out of it. Just the fact that you've actually done that learning piece, and you've got the opportunity to reflect. So in a 10-year stretch, there are lots of times when it's hard and when you're down. And I think, I'm proud that we've got through a number of those periods. It's not just an easy ride. That's not what life is, and that's not running a business is.
No.
I think I'm certainly, we talk about managing people, I know, but I'm proud of just the fact that we've got this far. That's statistically unlikely in itself. And I'm proud that we're actually certainly recently being more open-minded about learning how to manage different people and not just saying, well, this is what we do and that is it. I think in order to grow a business, certainly where you need a lot of people, you need to be pretty open-minded about who you're recruiting, how you're recruiting them, different people's learning styles. And if you're too prescriptive, the reality is that you probably won't achieve anything. Equally, that said, I think if you're not consistent and you don't do what you say you're going to do and you allow people to run riot, that also is totally counterproductive. So not a very good answer maybe, but it is a constant balancing act between being flexible but also knowing where the line is, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's about
Maybe
like,
that's something you really learn.
say that again,
You
sorry.
learn through, maybe that's something you just learn through experience.
But if like
Sorry.
helping people like identify their own strengths and building on those and that flexibility to work how they work best. But as you say, having that kind of consistency and fairness, I think, across the board. As you say, it's that
I mean,
line, isn't it?
that's it. And some of the best managers I've worked for have actually been pretty tough. You've had some pretty tough conversations with them, but you know two things. You know that if they're giving you I'm trying to think of the word that is correct for this podcast or whatever it is, but they're telling you off. You know that they're right. You know that you deserve it, and you know what you did was wrong. But equally, what you know is that once it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
So assuming that isn't the end of the road for you and it wasn't that catastrophic, whatever
Yeah.
you did, you know that half an hour later you've taken on board what they've said because they were correct. And then actually you can move on and there's no grudge being held. And I think, grudges and tit for tat in an office, they're so dangerous and those need to be nipped in the bud pretty quickly.
Yeah, 100%. That's it kind of it comes down to the environment, like the working environment and the culture. So if you've got that sort of toxic environment where that sort of thing does happen, where there are grudges and there are fallouts and there's the sort of behaviors that you don't want to see. I suppose my question off the back of that would be, what if you had to choose 3 words to describe Ecomotive's culture, what would they be?
Wow, this is where I really should have written some things down on that before you asked that question.
Just off the top of your head.
I think we are inclusive. We are open. We are genuinely kind of open-minded and modern from that perspective. We're not a business who shuts anybody out in any role. And we like diversity. In fact, we think it's probably something that is needed in order to grow. So that would be one. From a culture perspective, I think we're actually just a nice place to work, and it's surprising because I'm horrible. No, I'm joking. You sometimes get wrapped up in these things, and then you look at how many people who've come back, having left and come back to work here.
That is a really good sign.
Yeah, and that's in drivers, but also in the office, and actually, there's nothing wrong with being nice. There isn't. That's fine. You want people to be able to come to work. And I'm really hunting hard for number 3. And I think the other thing is, certainly from the management, it's kind of promoting a kind of a growth mindset as well. So every year we want to be bigger and better than we were before. So bigger certainly, but also we want to do what we do better. And just occasionally somebody will mention, that we might have had it sorted a few years ago, or that if things are tough, maybe we should contract or go backwards. And that is one thing that doesn't get mentioned very often, but it's not what we're doing here. We are growing, we are learning, and we are moving forward. And I think, it's so important to do that.
That's really good. Brilliant, thank you. What's next for Ecomotive when it comes to your kind of people priorities and all that sort of stuff? What's on your radar?
Well, as I say, the whole business is people. So more and more training. anything from teaching people how to deal with stress if they feel stressed. And I think what I've learned is that a lot of the time people feel stressed, it's not necessarily even work that's doing it. It can be things going on at home, or we've got to understand things better. So we're just doing a lot more training in every area, and that will help. I think the other one is just removing roadblocks and barriers to anybody doing a job. So in people's jobs, the whole thing comes down to efficiency. We live in a world where, frankly, the margins aren't great doing anything unless you're the inventor of some sort of, brilliant tech product. So actually, in terms of growing the business, and growing profit margins, which obviously we need to reinvest in the business, because that's the only way you're going to grow. Sadly, it doesn't all go in my pocket, which is a pity. I'm joking, but we have to grow efficiency. So every process needs to be looked at. And what I think I've found is at times that people fear numbers. And so again, there's an education piece on the fact that numbers don't necessarily need to be at the detriment of those relationship skills. In fact, if we deliver the right numbers and we're on those, that actually will add to the customer service and will add to people's enjoyment hitting those numbers if it's done in the right way. And there's so many tricks you can use, so many kind of clever things you can do in an office to give people enjoyment, even for the more mundane tasks. In terms of recording little successes, not making an environment seem monotonous, or I think at times people can feel in a business that they're only ever told about the things that have gone wrong. And there's a balance to get right there. So yeah, look, we're aware that basically the entire business is selling labor, selling time, selling people, as most businesses are. And in order to do that, we've got to grow the efficiency, but also provide better training, and more well-rounded training that isn't just focused on most things. Actually, funny enough, if you get the right training, even if it seems like it's something that isn't going to affect the bottom line, it does, because it impacts people's mental health, or it impacts the amount of time they come to work and how productive they are at work. So it's all tied in.
Yeah, and like that's music to my ears, because I think a lot of the time leaders, when it comes to stuff to do with people, whether it's improving employee engagement or looking at the culture or whatever it might be, they can't see that direct correlation. Whereas actually it's inextricably linked. I think like disengaged employees, I think you're straight away you lose 34% of their salary, like before they've even, that's it. So so many companies are hemorrhaging money because they assume that their people are engaged and they're actually not, or whatever it might, or they know they're disengaged and not doing anything about it.
And the cost of rehiring people if they then leave because they're not engaged. Weirdly, one of the advantages of improving processes and increasing our margin is that we actually get to invest that back in the people. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We invest it back in the people stay, the people do a better job, margins increase, they get paid more, so on and so forth, and almost life becomes fairly easy. Hopefully I just almost make myself redundant. That's the dream. And then I'll find something else.
It's so true. I think a lot of companies these days, they're recruiting to replace rather than recruiting because they're growing. So as much as they want to be growing, they're not actually able to because their people aren't staying. So it's lovely to hear that it's otherwise with you. What's my next question? What advice would you give to a leader who is growing their team?
Listen to them. I think there needs to be a culture where you're asking people what they think, because there's loads of clever people. It's funny, we just had somebody new join and they were surprised at the quality of, not surprised, they were pleased at the quality of people that we have in the business. Matt, my new commercial director, and he's been delighted by that, genuinely. And so if they're bright and clever and they know your business, ask them what they think. So one of the things that I don't do enough, but I do try and do, I did a couple on Friday, is I do a coffee with Tom, and basically I invite one person to come and just have literally for an hour, and we just drink tea and talk about anything they want to talk about. So we talk about home, or we talk about the job, or we talk about things that they're struggling with, or things that they find really good.
Mhm.
And why wouldn't we listen to people who I have basically probably know about 10% of the job of what one of the people who takes bookings in this business do. So why wouldn't I ask them what they do and what can be improved?
Yeah.
I think the other part of the culture is that you can have three answers to a question when you're asked something, and people need to accept and understand those three answers. One is, yes, we can do that, and that's a fantastic idea. Two is, maybe we can do that at some point, but it's not now, and these are the reasons why. And the third answer is, no, we can't do that, and it's probably not going to happen. And all three are good answers, but people need to understand why. If they think they're just being ignored, that goes down really badly. No is still a perfectly good answer, and often is the answer. But if you tell people that, it's surprising, people accept it.
Yeah. And
And maybe you revisit it.
yeah, but as you say, it's giving that explanation why rather than just a no.
Yeah, precisely. Even though sometimes, I've got to admit, if I'm feeling a bit stressed, I might sit there and tense up, and I've got to force myself to, because we all have those days. But no, it's important.
Love it. One last question before we go, if that's okay. Moving forward, what do you see as your biggest challenge, I guess, as a leader?
To probably keep reinventing. I always worry that the last idea or the last scheme to grow the business was the last one I'm going to come up with. I think it's just keeping everybody pulling in the same direction. I find it remarkable how well we do when we get people all pulling in the same direction. And equally, at the times when we fail to do that, how quickly it goes really wrong. So we have a challenge at the moment where we've grown organically, and we have lots and lots of small offices on the same site, but they become little bubbles. And that's a new challenge that's happened over the last few years, where we have to kind of, not just engage with employees, but also people want to understand, I think today, probably in a way that they didn't 30 years ago, if I'm really honest, from what I gather. I was 8. They want to understand where the business is going and why and what their place in it is. People want to understand their place in the world. And that's can be quite hard at times. It's quite tough to hear that, it might be that new people, or some, even worse, some people that have been with the business for quite a while have lost their understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. And so that's almost, I say, a job in itself, but there's a number of ways you can communicate. So we have a weekly kind of newsletter, which goes out to all staff.
Right.
We try and do, we do loads of stuff like that. Obviously, you've got to get people to keep on reading it. I think the other thing is, from a leadership perspective, you need to be pretty resilient. There isn't a way around that. You do need to be pretty resilient. I mean, don't get me wrong, look after yourself, talk to people, but if you're planning on growing a business and you want it to be pretty big, it is hard. There's no two ways around it. And be aware of yourself when you're going down the wrong path. For me, been a couple of times when I caught myself when you're drinking too much. And it's because you're unbelievably stressed, and it's the wrong thing to do. So catch yourself, talk to some friends, get what help you need, and then move forward again. But it is what it is. If it was easy, then everyone would do it. That's just life.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think also,
sorry, carry on.
No, look, you make a choice to do something, you live by the choice. And it was my choice to start the business, and actually we're going to see it through.
Yeah.
And we're going to make people here proud to work here.
Yeah. Love it. I mean, what a way to finish. Thank you so much. I feel like I've finished on a wonderful note. Really, really interesting stuff. There's so much there. The growth mindset, I think, is so important for an organization. having everyone kind of knowing that they're all rowing in the same direction, they're all, you know, on the boat, and they're using their oars for good rather than slowing the boat down. So much our viewers can take. Really interesting stuff. Tom, it's been a pleasure. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing you at the next Future of Our People. Thank you.